Pederastic interest/behavior in men, examining assumptions via the broad perspective. Western clinical, victimological, and popular thinking generally holds that adult male erotic attraction to males in the pederastic range is highly abnormal, a condition that necessarily pertains to a small minority of men whose attractions must have resulted from abnormal circumstances such as disturbed development, e.g. brain injury, or deformed personality, e.g. poor self-esteem. Notably, the same thinking used to apply to gay attractions, but that eroded in the aftermath of gay liberation when such attractions came to be seen by liberal society as normal and non-pathologically caused. The rule that came to dominate thinking... I have to scroll through this very long table. I'm so very sorry. Thinking was that sexual attractions are normal when they are directed at other fully mature persons, whether the same or opposite sex. However, when directed primarily at less than fully mature others, such attractions are disorders, e.g. Blanchard et al. 2009. The unarticulated assumption in this thinking is that adult sexual attractions have been, quote, designed, e.g. by evolution, to be directed only at other adults, and pederastic attractions are therefore against design, and consequently unnatural and abnormal. Cf. Wakefield, 1992. A counterpoise to this assumption is that it is culturally constructed that, quote, unnatural and hence abnormal are conflations with uncultural, and that judgment as to facts of nature have been biased by hegemonic cultural values. Cf. Vanguard, 1972, Williams, 1999. The historical and cross-cultural evidence in Table 3, the related scholarly source material, and the many literature reviews on homosexuality across time and place are probative regarding these competing accounts. In society after society in the table, it was the typical adult male, not the deviant one who had erotic interest in immature males, an interest that usually ended shy of attainment of full sexual maturity by the younger males, a stage in development that pervasively represented a sexual turnoff for the adult males. In most of these societies, erotic attractions to fully mature males were rare and scorned. In ancient Greece and Rome, adult males were generally attracted to smooth, young bodies, boys in the flower of youth, beginnings of puberty until beard growth, and women in their prime. Hubbard, 2003, Williams, 1999. Body hair, e.g. on face and legs, was decisive in ending boys' attractiveness. Not only women, but boys too, were frequently seen as beautiful, as repeatedly expressed in love poetry written by Greece and Rome's premier poets. Men exclusively attracted to only one gender were considered eccentric, although it was common for them to be more inclined to one gender than the other. Williams, 1999, page 228. Men's sexuality was energized by difference, women's different gender, boys' different age and level of maturity, and sometimes other adult men's different gender orientation, i.e. cross-gendered. Williams laid out this pattern of difference as a principle of mature male eroticism across time and place, except for the modern West, with its unique emphasis on egalitarian sexual relations. Cross-cultural reviews of male homosexuality support Williams's thesis, e.g. Adam, 1985, Greenberg, 1988, Hurt, 1997, and Murray, 2000. The essentials of ancient Roman adult male erotic attractions applied to most of the other literate civilizations in Table 3, e.g. ancient Greece, Renaissance Italy, pre-Meiji Japan, Muslim societies of North Africa, and Western Central Asia. In Muslim societies from the 8th to 19th centuries, particularly extensive documentation shows that, quote, men's attraction to boys was considered as natural as their attraction to women, unquote. Rowson, 1997, page 159. and that it was widely taken for granted that, quote, beardless youths posed a temptation to adult men as a whole and not merely to a small minority of deviants, unquote. Rueheb, 2005, page 115. Monroe, 1997, illustrated these common beliefs by quoting a 12th century religious jurist who remarked that, quote, he who claims that he experiences no desire when looking at beautiful boys or youths is a liar, and if we could believe him, he would be an animal, not a human being. Page 117. Though pederastic behavior was condemned by Islam, a carryover from its Judeo-Christian roots, pederastic desire was not disapproved, unlike in Judeo-Christian culture, a circumstance that contributed to its flourishing. As in Muslim societies, pederasty was pervasive in China and Japan until the 19th century. Much evidence remains of its practice and prevalence in these cultures owing to the extensive legacy of writings and other source materials dealing with it. Hinch, 1990, Loip, 1995, Watanabe and Iwata, 1989. For example, in Japan's Tokugawa period, 1603 to 1868, the overwhelming majority of sexual or romantic references attests to a culturally entrenched bisexuality in men directed at women and boys, the latter aged 10 to 18, with 14 to 17 being the prime, Loip, 1995. Important with respect to drawing inferences about pederasty is the complete cultural independence between societies of the Far East and the Mediterranean and Near Eastern societies, coupled with a common pervasiveness of pederastic interests in both. Likewise, the many non-literate cultures in Table 3, which were independent of the high civilizations and often each other as well, and in which pederastic desire and behavior were similarly pervasive, add force to inferences about mature males' potential for pederasty. Beauty and intensely passionate feelings concerning peripubertal and adolescent boys were recurring themes in both the literate and pre-literate cultures in Table 3. In the former, traditions of love poetry focused particularly on boyish beauty and strong passions and were crafted not merely or necessarily to express personal feelings, but to feed the demands of a literate audience, where such perceptions and feelings were commonplace. Hinch, 1990, Lear and Cantarella, 2008, Loip, 1995, Rueheb, 2005, Williams, 1999. These traditions are indicators of widespread, genuine pederastic desire for boys in those cultures rather than mere role-playing in response to custom and cultural expectations. Notably, men in these cultures saw beauty in both women and boys. A parallel love poetry genre existed for both. Just as men eroticize women in all human societies in connection with their perceived beauty, so they often eroticized boys in the societies in Table 3 in connection with perceptions of boyish beauty. This is an important point because part of sexual victimological theory is that erotic attractions to minors are based essentially on power, not sex. Cf. Paglia, 1992. This view, however, was never based on empirical evidence, but instead derived from ideological assumptions coupled with clinical impressions. The empirical evidence in the present historical and cross-cultural review, however, locates pederastic desire in genuine eroticism rather than in, quote, power needs, unquote. In short, contrary to Western thinking, in these cultures, pederasty was not confined to men on the fringes, but applied alike to typical men, high-status men, e.g. chiefs, and esteemed men, e.g. the who's who. The clinical, victimological, and popular assumption in the West that pederastic desire is intrinsically deviant for the entire human species is both incorrect and clearly a social construction, as the historical and cross-cultural perspective amply reveals. The assumption that if a, quote, normal man is going to be attracted to another male, then that male must be an adult is a late 20th century Western construction, not an empirical induction based on the historical record of what normal men have actually found attractive. Later, the issue of pederasty and design is examined, cf. Wakefield, 1992, but for now it seems clear that Western assumptions about unnaturalness and intrinsic abnormality are conflations with unculturalness, cf. Bullo, 1976, Vanguard, 1972, Williams, 1999. A theoretically important point is the repeated finding across the societies in Table 3 that individual males differed in their pederastic inclinations inasmuch as few men had particularly enduring attractions focused mostly on boys. Many had a mix of attractions to both boys and women, but often somewhat inclined toward one or the other, and some others were concentrated mostly on women, e.g. Davenport, 1965, Hurt, 1997, Loip, 1995, Rueheb, 2005, Williams, 1999. This pattern suggests a natural variation in pederastic tendencies along a continuum. In societies tolerating or approving the behavior, e.g. ancient Greece, samurai Japan, or in environments encouraging it, e.g. the all-male English boarding schools or pirate and hobo societies, the continuum appears to be normally distributed. But in antagonistic societies or environments such as ours, this normally distributed potential is highly constrained in its actualization, such that only individuals presumably above a certain threshold on the continuum are likely to express the potential, producing a highly skewed distribution with the strong modal outcome being no expressed interest at all. This speculation is consistent with the historical and cross-cultural data as well as with the pattern in our own society and suggests approaching pederasty as a normally distributed behavioral tendency that interacts with the cultural environment at hand to produce the phenotypic distribution. Contemporary Western assumptions that locate the cause of pederasty in idiosyncratic pathology, which describes dominant professional opinion well, rather than in the interaction between pre-existing potentials and cultural environmental inputs, fail in light of the historical and cross-cultural evidence.